The following is a Papi Chulo Radio original program. The views and opinions expressed in the commentaries and/or interviews in the following program are solely those of the individuals and are not views of Papi Chulo Radio, its parent, affiliate, or subsidiary companies.
The Avengers Initiative, Hawkeye.
Welcome to the Avengers Initiative, Hawkeye, a PapiChuloRadio.com original series. Papi Chulo Radio, celebrating a decade of podcasting excellence. Today is Tuesday, December 7th, 2021, and I'm your host, Jeffrey Aruz. During this podcast, we'll be having an in-depth discussion on Disney Plus's Hawkeye. Please welcome my co-host, Professor X.
I've been thinking about your branding issue.
I think about it all the time. Let's jump into our discussion of Season 1, Episode 3, which was titled Echoes, and debuted December 1st, 2021 via Disney+. Here's the official synopsis of the episode. After narrowly escaping the tracksuits and their daunting leader, Maya Lopez, Clint and Kate work together to find answers. With each step they take, however, they find themselves sliding deeper into a rapidly growing conspiracy. Dun dun dun. I felt it needed that after that last line. So let's jump into this. And we start off actually in the past, in the year 2007, and we see a young Maya through her eyes, actually. You know, we see what her life is like as a kid with her very protective father, her mysterious uncle, and then we flash forward to the night in which it appears as if the Ronin kills her father as well as his, let's call them co-workers. So, Professor, talk to me about the opening. What did you think? Any surprises? Did you enjoy the direction that they took, especially giving us, you know, that opening really from Maya's perspective?
It was a very interesting choice. It is odd to spend so much of the episode basically humanizing your villain, because, you know, at the end of the last episode, it was looking like Maya was presumably going to be the big bad, or at least, you know, their major opponent. And so to open up this episode with her backstory, and, you know, a very sensitive backstory, you know, sort of explaining who she is and all of that, and giving a motivation for her hatred of Ronan, was really an interesting choice. It worked on me. I find, I really, I find myself, it's a little early to be hoping for a redemption arc for Maya, but I'm pulling for it. I think, the actress they've got playing her is really good. I think I read somewhere that the child actor who plays the younger version of her is actually the actress's real life cousin, which is kind of cool. It is interesting, and I think it's obvious who her uncle is. It's Kingpin. I mean, that had to be Vincent D'Onofrio's voice, chuckling when he was there. So I think it's quite obvious that we're going to be getting Kingpin.
Oh, 100%. Even if it wasn't Vincent D'Onofrio's voice, even if they had just recast him, which I don't think they did, just the physicality, the physique was clearly meant to imply Kingpin, or, to express Kingpin. Little Maya was adorable. She was fantastic. The reveal that Maya, as a character, is an amputee was interesting, because I don't know if Echo, I know in the comics from what I've read, Echo is deaf, but I don't know if she's also an amputee. So adding that element into the show, I thought was interesting, because we have all these characters that have disabilities. We have Clint, that has hearing issues. He's wearing a hearing aid. We have Maya, who is deaf completely, and she's also an amputee. We also have Pizza Dog, who is, it looks like he's missing an eye, or she. I don't know if Pizza Dog is a boy or a girl, but yeah, I thought that was interesting. I mean, Kate doesn't appear to have one, so it's fascinating that they're sort of they have cast, or they have a cast of characters that have disabilities, and sort of, I think it's an interesting message, Professor.
Well, Kate is dealing with the crippling sense of entitlement that
Well,
is typical
yeah,
of her
it does.
generation. So
It weighs
one could
heavily on her
argue.
shoulders. Yeah.
No, I do think that's an interesting point about, the disabilities and the fact that, aside from in this episode, where Clint is dealing with the loss of his hearing aid, none of these things are stopping people from being accomplished. In Maya's
Hmm.
case, her deafness doesn't hold her back. In fact, she regards it as, as almost a badge of honor.
Hmm. Even a strength.
Yeah. Well, indeed, they're sort of explaining in the comics, Echo's superpower is that she can, observe any move that someone does against her in a fight and immediately copy it. They're sort of explaining it here by the sense that maybe it's not a superpower as such, but maybe it's just that she's had to be so much more observant. And you can sort of see that both in her fight as a kid and in her fight as a grown-up. Which was interesting. But yeah, like even the idea of, Lucky is missing an eye. It is kind of interesting. But as I say, none of them it's not holding anyone back. And even when Clint loses his hearing aid, it does make it more difficult to communicate with Kate, but it doesn't affect him or his fighting ability in any way. So I think that's, a fair, a sort of, low-key, clever, progressive element in this.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. So, outside of the fact that Maya was just freaking adorable as a child, the other side of this flashback, the one where we jump ahead to where she's an adult and she witnesses the Ronin killing her father as well as his goons, his goon mates, his co-baddies. Uh, my question for you, Professor, is because we get all of this from Maya's perspective. So we don't necessarily see Clint as Ronin doing this. Now, during the Ronin era, Clint was doing stuff like this, taking out criminal syndicates and all that kind of stuff. So it isn't shocking that Ronin would do this. But I'm kind of wondering, Professor, if as a way to, what would be the right word? To save Maya in the present day, could we find out that that was not Clint, but a Ronin copycat? Do you think?
No,
No?
I think you're really struggling with that. I
Okay.
mean, the idea is that the sword was one of a kind, and I think that would really be undercutting it because I think part of the Hawkeye thing is going to be Clint is going to have to come to grips with his past.
Oh,
You
100%.
know,
I do agree with
he's
that.
and I think if we had the idea that it was a Ronin copycat or something like that, it would be letting him off the hook. So I really don't see them going that way. I think it's important that Clint has to deal with the consequences, and I think part of the weariness that we're seeing in him, it's not just the blip and fighting Thanos and all of that. It's he's got some trauma, not just over losing that, but also about the realization of what he did. As Ronin, everyone else got to disappear and come back 5 years like nothing had happened. Clint went through a really dark night of the soul. And certainly in terms of what we've seen, of his on-screen time, we haven't seen him deal with that or deal with the consequences of it. So I think that they have to make that. Now, they don't necessarily have to have, him admit to having been the Ronin himself, but I think the idea that it was someone else wearing the costume would just be a cop-out.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. I think it was during the second episode last week where I mentioned that we were going to have to get a Ronin reckoning with Clint because it seems like, he has to at least completely atone for what he did, or at least, he has to get closure with that portion of his life. But I was wondering, because some people online were like, could that be a way to maybe give Maya closure? I don't know what they were saying, but it was an interesting theory, so I figured I'd bring it up as a just in case if it does end up going that direction. I don't think it will, though. But yeah, we're going to have to wait and see how they deal with this, because clearly Maya wants revenge. There's another character out there that wants revenge as well, but we haven't seen that one just yet. But yeah, she's out there. So let's talk about where we pick up the episode, which is exactly where we left off, at the abandoned toy shop, in which Clint and Kate are strapped to those little, I don't know what they're actually called, but they're outside of the supermarkets. It's the rideable contraptions that kids enjoy. Sometimes they're dragons or horses, and you put coins in it, and they're entertained for like 90 seconds, based off of like maybe 75 cents. But they're strapped to those. We see a little bit of the inner workings of the tracksuit mafia in all of their ridiculata, and there is an escape. There is a fight sequence in the toy shop where Clint does get his hearing aid knocked out, and it gets smushed. So, Professor, let's talk about everything that happens in the abandoned toy shop. Your thoughts?
Well, one thing that's interesting about Hawkeye that I think is making it, really stand out is you're noticing a real stylistic difference. It's almost like watching, a DC TV show, because there they bring in different directors, and you really get the feeling of a different director's hand on the till. You've got action directors, and you've got, plot directors, and so on and so forth. The action in this episode was, it was just a leap above what we saw. Now, partially that's, the scripting and what was called for, but just the creative shooting of it. And the setting up of it, felt completely different. This was, clearly a director, or a pair of directors in this case, who are much more in the action vein. I thought it was great, the idea that, at one point Clint was, fighting the tracksuit mafia off by using stuffed animals. And then Echo, interestingly, used a stuffed animal, a unicorn, on him, and he'd been sitting on a unicorn. Coincidence? Almost certainly. I know it was a great fight, and the payoff for the fact that, and again, the idea that Echo doesn't allow her quote disabilities end quote to define her or hold her back. The fact that the only time the fact that she's missing her leg comes into play is when Clint tries to take her out by hitting the leg, and nothing happens. And his reaction to that is what gives her the opportunity to then use that leg to kick him upside the head. It really is interesting. The initial questioning scene with Clint was really interesting as well. Her talking about, you don't need the hearing aid, you might find her better without it, was an interesting approach. Her sort of, going after Kate, but then the idea that, it's clear that there is someone above her, because, Kazi, sort of stepping in, basically stopping her from, doing anything serious to Kate or Clint, and even them insisting on, get them alive. Does suggest that there is, someone above them. But no, it was a really fun, cleverly shot and choreographed fight scene. A bit unrealistic, except that you did have it, starting off with Kazi telling them, don't kill them, which sort of explains how Clint was able to get away with them so easily. So I really liked it, especially possibly my favorite scene was Clint hiding in the ball pit and just lunging up like a creature from the Black Lagoon to stab the guys in the feet.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it was a really well done action set piece. If we did not have what's coming next, this could have been, like the highlight action sequence of this episode, because it was so interesting. It was a lot of fun, if I can say that. Yeah, well, they were in a toy shop, using the elements at hand. So that made it like really almost brawl-ish, because it's not like they went in with a whole bunch of tricks to play with. They really have to use the atmosphere around them, and I thought that was really interesting. It gave me sort of like an Agent Carter vibe. The television series Agent Carter, she would just have to use whatever was in the room with her as a weapon, and that's what we were seeing at this abandoned toy shop. Before I move on, there's something that's brought up later in the episode that I figure I should ask now. Later on, Kate basically tells Clint, so what's going on with that dude and Maya? And we got a lot of that in this section. So I'll ask the question now, Professor. What's going on with that dude, Kazi, and Maya? What do you think?
I don't know. I would assume that he's not a member of the Tracksuit Mafia per se. I would assume that he's more the go-between between Maya and her uncle, who we all know is Kingpin. So he's, just the idea that, he's the one guy that knows ASL. He's probably someone who Kingpin brought in, in order to be, sorry for the pun here, his eyes and ears, on the ground to keep an eye on his niece and, ensure that, she gets the respect she deserves and can be the communicator so that she can, work effectively with the Tracksuit Mafia. Anything beyond that, boy, it is interesting. There does seem to be a vibe there. Now, this could just be the vibe that, I always complain about people saying, when two, appropriately attractive people of the appropriate age are thrown together on screen, we just assume they're going to end up, knocking boots. I don't know. It does certainly seem, especially in the second scene they had together, after when they're, leaving the building. It did certainly seem that, it was more than just an employer-employee relationship, even though she did sort of shut him down with the who's really in charge here. But if it turns out that he's the guy who's reporting to Kingpin, then he's not as, low down the pecking order as she might think. So I would not be surprised to see some sort of payoff come from that. And, they have been showing this guy in every episode, as Kate referred to him as the Hawkeye. They have been sort of, letting the camera linger on him. So he has to play some more important role than just a member of the Tracksuit Mafia.
Yeah, I agree. So I wonder what that is. I do like the idea that he is maybe the liaison between her and her uncle, because we do also have a line from him in this episode later on where he's like, your uncles might not like what you're doing, this obsession with the Ronin. So, Professor, I think you probably hit the nail on the head, because it seems as if either he's the liaison. It seems like he also might be a little bit fearful of her uncle as well, which maybe she isn't because she sees her uncle as her uncle. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like, he's practically family, so I'm not afraid of him. But there seemed to be real concern when he brought that up. Did you catch that as well?
Yeah, it's also curious because, when they were having that conversation, Kazi also mentioned her father, talking about, because her father must have been sort of like a low-level, mafia guy as well, because he said he always put the crew first, whereas, Maya hadn't done that. So it's interesting now whether this was just that, Kazi had heard about, her father, or, maybe Kazi disappeared with the blip, so he's, 5 years younger than everyone else. But it was interesting in that he seems to be someone who has experience both with her father and her uncle. So as I say, it seems, that, he's much more than just another member of the mafia, the Tracksuit Mafia. I think he has to be someone who's more highly connected. And probably reporting back on what's happening with her to Kingpin.
Yes, I co-sign all of that. Yeah, clearly he's important. He actually has been given a lot more lines than the rest of the Tracksuit Mafia sort of hench people. So yeah, I'm interested to see where things go with him.
Also, it mentioned that he works for, later on in the episode, it mentions that he works for a company named Sloan, which did not ring any comic book bells for me, but I'm willing to bet that will turn out to be the Kingpin's organization.
Very nice. I like it. I'm here for it. Speaking of things I'm here for, let's talk about one of the best damn car chases that I've seen this year, as well as in a Disney Plus series, period. It was, what was it, like 8 minutes long? It was spectacular. There was this whole thing where we were in the car spinning around, getting every different angle of what was going down. There was spectacular Christmas music. An inflatable Santa was run over, but miraculously popped back up alive. Christmas trees were flung everywhere. There were so many damn trick arrows. I think everybody that watched gasped when we saw the PIM logo on an arrow. Um, Good grief. There's so much to discuss here, Professor. So I'm just going to let you have at it. The car chase. What did you think of it?
It was amazing, especially, the sort of, almost knowing inside or almost a wink to camera. Oh, I'm not going to take the Charger because that's a classic, beautiful car, and I'm not going to wreck it. And then having it get wrecked, of course, it's going to get wrecked. But it was again. I mentioned before, there are directors who are just really good at action, and this was very creatively shot. You mentioned, the fact that they had to have had like, some sort of 360-degree camera unit set up. There's no way a human camera person, could have shot from the back seat and gotten those shots they were getting, where it was basically just rotating through 360 degrees repeatedly. Now, and again, I have no idea how much of that was done, in camera, how much of that, they can do so much with CG. A lot of that could have been CG'd or could have been stitched together from multiple takes. I don't know. But it certainly felt real in the moment. Like that opening shot with no cuts that I could see and no real spots where I could see where you could hide a cut. Because usually when you're watching an uninterrupted shot like that, you can spot the points where there could be a scene that has to be covered. It went on for at least a minute of just that sort of rotating from the backseat shot without a break. And, for something like that to happen, everything has to be perfectly choreographed. The window has to smash at exactly the right moment. The other window has to smash. The cars have to be in the right location when it spins around to the back of the shot. I mean, the choreography of something like that, it beggars the imagination how you could schedule something like that to come out so perfectly, because so often what we're seeing in action shots is very fast cutting. And when it's fast cutting, you can hide a lot of mistakes because you can simply hide it on the edits. With something like this, where it has to be planned out that thoroughly and executed so perfectly, it was just an amazing piece of film. And as you say, one of the most amazing action scenes we've had, I think, in the Disney Plus Marvel shows so far. I can't just off the top of my head think, there were some great fight scenes in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And some really great set pieces in Loki, but I don't think anything compares to, just the sheer sort of, the naked realism of this scene, how real it felt and yet how crazy. As you say, the trick arrows were great. My favorite was probably the one that grabbed all the trees and just, brought them back in. What do you call that one? Or the USB arrow. Yeah, and it's also interesting. Like even in the midst, while on the one hand it was just a great action scene, a great set piece, a great car chase, it was also playing off the notion of communication. That Clint and Kate were at the beginning of it not communicating at all because obviously Clint couldn't hear her. By the end of it, they were actually communicating reasonably well. They were sort of getting in sync. They were working together effectively, which I think was, a sort of a more subtle element to the car chase. That on the one hand, you can be, blown away by the bravura filmmaking of it, but on the other hand, there is still that character stuff going on, which I thought was really nicely done. And they played off each other. There were some great funny lines, like talking about the plunger arrow or the USB arrow or all of those things. There was a lot of humor and a lot of character work, even though it was like an absolutely fantastic action sequence as well.
Yes, it was a visual feast. It was spectacular. It was suspenseful. It was fun. It was everything. Like I did notice a couple of green screen moments, but for the most part, it felt real. It felt real life. Like, they were just driving around and all this shit was happening. I did notice what you were saying, Professor, in the first minute. Everything was just synced perfectly. Like, it seemed as if, at least in this take, who knows how many times they did this, but everybody hit their marks. The cars, stopped at the right times, like when they had to spin around and all that kind of stuff. It was just spectacular. It was fantastic. Props to everybody involved in it because, wow, it was just stellar. It was completely unexpected. And the fact that it went on for so long and it was still hella interesting, props to them. I mean, they tried to have their Fast and Furious moment, and I would say they were incredibly successful in doing that because, wow, it was just amazing. And unfortunately, Maya, she was lumped in with all those tracksuits. They did allow Maya to be just a hair bumbling in that moment. I mean, she seemed like really strong and a formidable foe when they were at the toy factory, or the toy shop, abandoned toy shop. In this moment, she was just one of the tracksuits, unfortunately. Just sort of like bumbling their way through it, trying to not let those arrows affect her, as the others were not letting them affect them. But yeah, certainly this was the moment when Clint and Kate shined bright. So, moving on from this, there's a lot of small things that end up happening before we get to the end of the episode. Sort of like the main thing is that Clint does end up getting his hearing aid fixed, but even before and after that, this sort of section of the episode before they have a plan to go back to Kate's mother's residence and sort of start digging in on some of these tracksuits. The focus really is on Clint and Kate. There's a little bit of humor, because Clint can't hear, and also Clint might also be purposely ignoring Kate since, he can't hear her ramblings and that sort of thing. What did you think of Clint and Kate together throughout the rest of the episode, but before we get to the residence?
Well, it's interesting. We mentioned, there was, the opening, the Echo flashback, where we find out about Maya. But aside from that, after they get out of the thing, pretty much the entire episode from that point on is just Kate and Clint. And it's very different from the previous episode where they were off doing their own thing. In this one, they are thrown together and they are forced to stay together for pretty much the entire episode. So you really do get them playing off of each other. You got that sort of the almost brattiness of Kate, which again is comic book accurate, so I don't mind it. Where it's a good thing they call you Hawkeye, not Hawkeyer. And Clint's line, delete. The scene in, as you were mentioning, sort of, in the diner, they're allowed to just have the dog sitting there at the table. I don't know about that. I don't know what New York's, laws on, animals in restaurants is like, but I was a little surprised by that. But yeah, as you mentioned, the idea that he's, intentionally left his hearing aid off. So, we're sort of coming out of the previous scene. We don't know that he's gotten his hearing aid fixed. So we're watching it and we're seeing Kate basically chattering on as Kate tends to do. And Clint is just sitting there, and it's done in silence. And then we realize it's because he hasn't turned his hearing aid on. And she actually notices it and calls him on, did you have that off this entire time? And he just glosses over it. So again, they're really developing the dynamic. It's not quite father-daughter. It's not quite, buddy cop level. It's as I've said before, it's like those Looney Tunes cartoons of the big, quiet dog and the little yappy dog. It's just, I'm really, really enjoying it. It is delightful. And that scene where she's talking about his branding problem and basically shows him the costume, which is, pretty comics accurate for, being a bad drawing of a comics accurate costume. And he also, does sort of bring out that idea that, he's, He's been a ghost. He's a guy who's not supposed to draw attention. And that's really sort of, drawing out that thing that we've seen, that Clint is not comfortable being in this situation. And I think part of that is, as we said before, it's so he has all of these people, you're an Avenger, you're a hero, we love you, but he knows what he did as Ronin, during that time that no one talks about. And he also knows that, losing Black Widow, what that meant to him. And I think what we're seeing now is that a lot of it is, and I don't want to, say PTSD necessarily, but it is him having to come to terms with that. And I think that is going to be a big part of it. And perhaps having him, admit to Kate by the end of the series that, I'm not the hero you think I am, I was the Ronin. I was the one who was killing all of these people. I did some very, very bad things. And I think he's going to have to admit that and confess, just for his own sake as well as anyone else's. But that said, that's getting, a little dark and a little heavy. But, the vibe between them is phenomenal. I mean, the casting of those two, or the casting of Haley Steinfeld, I expected she'd be a good Kate Bishop, but I didn't expect this kind of, connection with Clint's character. So I'm loving it.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a lot that really needs to happen between now and the final episode. Yeah, we're on the third one, so we have 3 left. So one of these episodes is going to have to be a heavy episode where Clint really goes into like what he did. And I think, as you said, Professor, Kate is going to be the one that he has to, quote unquote, confess to. He's going to have to confess to her, and that's going to be the way that he's going to really come to face what he did during the Ronin era. And that's going to be interesting to see, because Kate's reaction to it, Clint's remorse for it, it's going to be an interesting scene. And I hope that we get that, hopefully in episode 5 at the latest, because I feel like that's going to be way too heavy for it to be a final episode thing. We're going to have to get a moment where maybe Kate feels, confused, like, did I pick the right person to be a hero? Or she's going to be like, you know what you did because everybody coped in the way that they did during that time, or something. I feel like she's going to have the right thing to say to him to sort of like, make him come to terms with why he did it and that sort of thing. I have to wait and see, but I'm looking forward to it because I think Clint as a character needs that. And it's going to make sense, after all this time of them bonding, that he would confess it to her versus anyone else. Stay tuned. I know apparently episode 5 is going to be big, so listeners, stay tuned for that as well. One thing that I want to bring up before you even get to the end, Professor, is how this production, out of all of the productions, I'm like trying to go through my brain. Yes, I feel like this production has given us really the feel of a 6-hour movie more than any of the other Disney Plus series. And I'm enjoying that. Everything really is flowing at a brisk pace. And I think it might also be that they've given us the Christmas deadline. So everything is feeling in, I don't want to say real time, because real time means that, the 45 minutes that we watched would have been 45 minutes in the life of what they're doing. But it's giving us a good flow in what we're watching. Like, there really aren't any dull spots. There aren't slow spots. Like, everything feels, with the tension sort of, taken to the nth degree, because not only does Clint have, the Christmas deadline, but everything seems to be happening, and the direction in which we're going seems to be going into some sort of direction where we know something big is going to happen before the end of this series. And I'm really enjoying that vibe. More so We're getting that movie vibe, although, like let's say Falcon and the Winter Soldier was incredibly cinematic and this or that or the other, the cliffhangers were interesting, but the type of cliffhangers that we're getting here, we're really picking up like right at the second where we left off. For the most part, I know that we had a flashback at the start of the episode, but after the opening title card, we really pick up exactly where we left off. So I'm enjoying the pace. The pacing is interesting. I don't know if you've noticed the pacing, or
You know, I'm generally enjoying the pacing. I think it's very fast, but as I said, they still have time for the character moments, which I like. There was the great scene where before Clint gets his hearing aid repaired, when he's on the phone with his son and he can't hear his son, and Kate steps in to basically translate using letters that were clearly not written by Kate. There's no way she could write that fast and that neatly. It's physically impossible. And again showed that Kate, for all that she is mocking him and the Hawkeye, Hawk ear, and stuff like that. She is basically a good person at heart. She is a little spoiled. She is a little self-entitled, but she is a caring person. And to sort of see her just very sort of quietly step up and do that for him, without being asked, to realize that this is a way that I can help, was really good. And even having Clint at the end of it, basically just thanking her for that, was to acknowledge what she did. So again, we're getting those great character moments in with the action. I'm not sure I agree that it felt, this episode to me, more so than the previous episodes, the ending of it felt really truncated. It just seemed to stop out of nowhere. So I'm not sure I agree that this one, the pacing of this one was great right up until the end. It felt almost like something was missing, but that said, it was a great cliffhanger.
well, let's talk about the cliffhanger. So we head to the Bishop residence, that gorgeous, I'll call it Park Avenue penthouse type of situation. I love how like the sort of setup to this is we're gonna go like infiltrate my mom's. I mean, they just walked in. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they were
Yeah.
quiet. They were kind of maybe sneaking a little bit, but I mean, she fucking lives there. I mean, how can you infiltrate where you live? But it sounded kind of dramatic and fancy, and I think Kate was really into it, so I think that's why she worded it the way that she did. But I'm like, come on, like you can't infiltrate your home. But anyway, she ends up going into the computer system, and she's got the codes, and she starts researching Kazi. I have no idea how they knew his last name, and I have no idea how she spelled it properly, but she did, and she knew it, and she looked him up, and that's when she found the Sloan, thing that you said, maybe this is Kingpin's operation in the MCU proper now. And while all that's going down, she also, because she's stuck on Jack. She is stuck on Jack has to be involved. She feels like Jack is the person that ended up murdering Armand the Third, and so she's gonna research him, but there are roadblocks. It seems like her password or whatever code she has is not working. She's trying to fix that situation. Clint is mesmerized by the home. There is a fantastic line that was delivered beautifully by Jeremy Renner where he was like, damn, like I signed up for the wrong line of work, because he was in awe, marveling over this home. He hears something, he goes to investigate, and there is Jack with the Ronin sword, retractable sword, and the sword is pressed up against Clint's neck. And that's where we leave things. The professor said it was a little, maybe the pacing was off. I didn't mind it just because they seem to keep on doing this, where, we get to a point where something happens and then it's like, pause. It's almost like if you're watching a really long movie, like let's say you're watching the Lord of the Rings, the extended version of the Lord of the Rings, and then you just pause it to go make some more popcorn, and then you unpause, and then that's kind of like seeing the next episode. So I didn't mind it. I was wanting more, because this episode was just 45 minutes, and I feel like all these episodes should be an hour length just because who was it? I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Kevin Feige. It was like, oh, these are going to be 6 hour long, 6 hour long series, this, that, or the other. I don't think we've ever gotten a fully 6 hour long Disney Plus series. Even if you combined all the 9 episodes of WandaVision, if you combined the 6 episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier, the 6 episodes of Loki, individually, those were not 6 hour long productions, because we've never gotten like full 1 hour episodes each for those series. Well, WandaVision would have been 30 minutes, but you know what I'm saying. So it's like, oh man, I wanted more, because it was so much fun. So,
Well,
Professor.
and even to say it's a 45-minute episode, there's probably 8 minutes of credits, and we get the 8 minutes for every episode.
Yeah,
so,
that is true.
That's taking collectively off. To call it a 6 hour movie is a bit disingenuous.
Yeah, it is. So, because it would be nice if we got like the final episode of the series, or season, depending on if it gets more seasons, to be like an hour and a half. Like, if you're gonna be trimming and have 45 minutes episodes here, 50 minutes episodes there, we deserve an hour and a half at the end. I'm just saying. I mean, it's been a whole lot of fun. So, Professor, your thoughts on the end, what it means? Are you still rooting for the idea that Jack is an innocent? Did Jack not kill Armand? I'm going to throw this out there. Did
Well,
Eleanor kill Armand?
I don't know if Eleanor did or Eleanor paid someone to do it, but I'm convinced that Jack did not do it. I did, enjoy, Kate's line, basically mirroring what you said last week. When trying to explain why Jack is a killer, he tried to give me a butterscotch.
I know.
Yes, that's
Damn
very
butterscotch.
clear. Yes, all those grandparents who are obviously killers.
Yes, they are.
But no, it was a good scene. It was just, it did sort of, after all of the action, just have the episode end with, computer stuff and, walking around the apartment. And also, why didn't, they brought Lucky in with them, didn't they? Why didn't Lucky, spot him and save the day as Lucky should? But no, I think, and again, I think, I think looking back on this after, whatever happens next week, I think it'll be important because I think there's going to be a reveal with Jack. Whether it is comic book accurate that Jack is the one who trained Clint in how to use a sword, or whether it's something else that they find out about him, will be something that, they didn't want to give away in this episode. So in that respect, the cliffhanger, I think, worked. But yeah, it just felt to me a little, kind of, after all the action, all the character stuff too, it was sort of like, the last bit of it, the end of it, we weren't getting the same vibe, the same fun dynamic between them. And then it just sort of, it felt like they were just more building to the cliffhanger than anything else. So for me, it didn't end as strongly as it might have, but everything up to that point I thought was great.
Okay. I have a follow-up question for you, but before I ask that follow-up, I have a different follow-up. Because you've called the dog Lucky twice. Is that comic book accurate? Was that a mistake?
He is Lucky the pizza dog in the comics.
Oh, okay, Lucky the pizza dog. Okay.
Lucky is his name. Pizza dog is his appellation.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so that helps me understand everything now. So the follow-up is, so this episode started a little strange because we did get that flashback at the start of the episode. Do you want to make a bold prediction that the next episode will start off maybe with a Jack-centric flashback?
I don't think so. Although it would be interesting because if you think about it, the way that the previous episode ended was with we meet Echo. And then the next episode, we get the flashback sort of explaining her. But I don't think we'll get that with Jack. I think, and again, part of that is I don't know how they're using Jack. Is Jack going to be the swordsman? Is he going to be, as I've speculated, maybe even a shield agent or something like that? I do think it's interesting that, Kate was able to get all that information on the tracksuit mafia guy. But when she tried to do something on Jack, she ran into a hardware problem. How interesting is that? Why would there be a problem when she's researching Jack, and the system suddenly wouldn't work unless someone with access to, really high level tech, was thwarting her in some way, or maybe the power broker or something along those lines. If they wanted to tie it
Oh
in that
God,
way.
not the power broker.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, I do want to find that out, but until we find out, what role they're going to have Jack play, I don't think he's just going to be, what we've seen so far. I think there has to be something more to that, whether that is tying into Clint's backstory, how he learned to fight, how he learned to use the bow so well, and everything like that, because we haven't gotten any of that in the movies. He's always just been a shield operative. So, will they go into the comic book well for, Jack or anything else? And, there's a lot. I mean, we still have 3 episodes left, but it seems like there's a lot of plates spinning right now. There are things that we know we have to get. There are people that we know we have to see. And it does seem like there's a lot to
Hmm.
be wrapped up in those 3 episodes.
There does. Yeah. And I do recall we always get to this point in a Disney Plus series where we are like, there's so much left, and they somehow figure out a way to do everything that we think it is so much to do over the course of 3 episodes. So I have faith in them that they will, at least give us a satisfying end to the series, hopefully answering a majority of the questions that we have. Whether it's the power broker, though, or Mephisto, hacking Bishop security, we'll have to stay tuned. But I do feel like you might be right about Jack. We're going to have to wait and see. But I think if we are going to get a moment in which Kate sees Jack in a different way, it's going to have to be in the next episode, I think.
And it could be,
Yeah.
again, if we're getting back to that idea of, maybe he's, a shield person or something like that. Clint might recognize him as that, because this would be the first time he's actually seeing who Jack is. So we could get the reveal that, actually, no, Jack is one of the good guys. And, and Kate's going to have to deal with that. And I think part of the reason they'll do it like that is, Kate is pretty consistently convinced she's right and generally wrong. So I think they're going to keep doing that for a while yet.
Yes. Yeah, I co-sign that. The only thing that is slightly disappointing to me because it's way too predictable is having Eleanor be the bad guy. Like having her, really be a very shady character because it seems like it's always the hero's parents that are like involved in nefarious stuff. So I'm kind of disappointed that they might be going in that direction. I know we've already said, you don't cast Vera Farmiga to be in, a series just to be like the doting mother and that sort of thing. And I get it. Like I love Vera. She is fantastic. I've seen her be evil and manipulative. I said during the premiere, I loved her on Bates Motel. So I've seen that side of her as an actor, and it is fantastic. It is just a little disappointing to me that, they're just going with evil parents as that sort of trope in the MCU. We still don't know how deeply involved she is. Maybe she isn't as deeply involved. Maybe she'll be to sort of borrow a character from the Arrowverse over on the CW. Maybe she'll be a Moira Queen type of person, or maybe even a Jada Jet type of person. We're going to have to wait and see, but I feel like that trope gets ridiculously overused. So, does a hero's journey need to include their parents being nefarious people? I guess maybe they do. I don't know. Stay tuned. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, Professor.
Well, I think, if it depends again on what they do with that. I'm just going to jump ahead to my bold prediction. The series will end with Clint home for Christmas, but Kate will be there with his family because Kate will be essentially, adopted, someone he's bringing in. But the reason she's going to be there is once she realizes that her mom is evil, she won't want to spend Christmas with her, obviously. And that might end up that, Kate, repudiating her mother and no longer having access to all the money and the fancy schools and everything like that, because of realizing that it's tainted. And that would be, an important step for growing up because as her mother said to her in that first episode, you've always been young and rich. That's giving you a warped view of reality. So for her to make the realization that the source of her money is tainted and basically, arguing for something else would be a big step towards growing up for her.
Okay. I can see that. I can also see a version where it's her and her mother showing up, you know, because she's a nice lady at the end of it all. She's probably not, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Good grief, if she's in cahoots with Kingpin, there's no turning back, Eleanor. I'm just saying, no turning back. We also still have the sort of crackpot theory that her father's still alive out there somewhere. So we'll see if that ends up happening. Stay tuned. Professor, any additional thoughts about the episode? Was there anything that I missed, a tiny little moment that you would like to discuss before we head into the MVP?
I'm sure this is nothing, but you never know with Marvel. There seem to be a lot of dragon references in this episode.
I
There's
noticed
there's
that.
a dragon in young Maya's activity book. When she was talking with her father, it was about dragons. Imagine Dragons was the band they chose to dump on in there, and I feel like there was another dragon reference, and I can't quite remember what it was. But it seemed to be that and again, I'm sure this isn't going to be crossing over with Shang-Chi or anything like that. Although how cool would that be? It just did seem to be a curious little thing. And, ordinarily, if you're watching a TV show, you just say, well, that's nothing. But with Marvel, you never know.
That is true. And if we think about even last week, the role-playing thing, it was like medieval times when there
Yeah.
would be dragons. That's interesting. Yeah. The dragon motif was heavy with Maya in the past. Like, I mean, one of the final things that her father said was like, fly on, little dragon. And then imagine dragons. Yeah. And there were unicorns and stuff. I have no idea how that would tie into any of this. I mean, the payoff in my mind would be they go to some sort of Christmas parade, but I'm thinking of like the Macy's Thanksgiving parade where they would have the big, animals, and all of a sudden there's a giant dragon there. I don't know how that would be payoff though, but because I don't feel like we're gonna see real dragons on Hawkeye, not in New York.
That would seem, yeah, unlikely.
Yes. Although, I mean, you never know. This is the MCU, and they do love to drop hints about so much. Stay tuned, listeners. So now it's time for the MVP, the most valuable player. State which character impressed you throughout the episode and why. Once a character has been chosen, they cannot be selected again. So choose wisely. Professor, who's your MVP? Pourquoi?
Well, there were three fantastic performances in the episode, but I think Jeremy Renner was my MVP. Just so great, playing the slow burns, the reactions, just absolutely delightful, and really, as we were talking about earlier, sort of playing up, there was a real sense of wistfulness of him missing his family that we haven't really had before, because this is the first episode where he's been away from them, and you're really getting a sense of what he's giving up by being there to help Kate, and the sense of the sense of loss, the sense of guilt, and possibly even PTSD that he's dealing with from his memories of what he did as Ronin. So I think Jeremy Renner did a great job of portraying this, not by talking about it, but just by acting it, and I thought that was very well done.
Fantastic choice. As much as I want to give it to my girl, Haley Steinfeld, for being fantastic in this episode, the one that just shined a little brighter for me was Maya Lopez. Young Maya and grown-up Maya in the present day. Maya Lopez, aka Echo, was fantastic in every one of the scenes that we saw her in. Props to, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Alakwa Cox as grown-up Maya Lopez, and as you said, Professor, it is true, Darnell Bessaw, who played young Maya Lopez, is her cousin. So props to both of them for really introducing this fascinating new character into the MCU. I'm here for her. I want to see more of her. I would love to see a redemptive arc for her. I don't know if we're going to get it in this series, but she does have her own series, so there is always time for redemption when you headline your own series. But as a sort of villainous thorn in the side of the Hawkeyes, she is doing a fantastic job, and the young little Maya was just adorable. It was such an interesting way to start the episode of really allowing us to get in her shoes, and just props to the MCU, props to the writers for, and both actors for doing a good job with that. So now it's time to rate the episode. How would you rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10 arrows? The point system is allowed. If you found the episode exceptional, deserving more than a 10, you may grant it the coveted golden quiver. Professor?
I'm going to give it a 10. I can't quite give it the golden quiver simply because, as I say, I thought it ended on a bit of a down note. But that said, the action was fantastic action. The character stuff was fantastic character stuff. It was moving. It was evocative. I just felt it didn't quite stick the ending for me. So I can't quite give it golden quiver territory, but I'm comfortable giving it 10 out of 10.
And I will co-sign. I'm going to give it a solid 10 as well. 10 arrows. It was fantastic, action-packed, suspenseful, from beginning to end for me. I did not mind how it ended. I thought everybody did a really great job. It certainly feels like we're in the middle of, like, the middle section of a movie. So everything, sort of calming down after the intensity of the first two action set pieces kind of made sense to me. And it felt like, I put a little pause. And as I said, I went to go and make popcorn. And I'll be back to pick up to see exactly what Jack is all about in the next episode. I enjoyed it from beginning to end. And on that note, join us next time for a brand new installment of the Avengers Initiative, Hawkeye. Here's our announcer to remind you on how you can interact with us.
Follow Poppy Chula Radio on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Poppy Chula Radio. Do you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns? Email us via contact@poppychularadio.com. Are you interested in joining the Poppy Chula Radio team as an on-air personality? Email talent@poppychularadio.com. Binge listen to your favorite Poppy Chula Radio programs by visiting poppychularadio.com/archives. You can also download tonight's broadcast and the rest of the series through Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Just search for The Avengers Initiative, Hawkeye, and subscribe.
Thanks, announcer. My co-host, please wish the listeners a good night.
Bro.
Love it. Thanks for tuning in. Download new episodes of The Avengers Initiative Hawkeye every Wednesday via Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and the Poppy Chula Radio archives. Good night.